All right, Sev. Episode 7. I ate so much pasta for lunch today that you call Italy right now for pasta. They only have Chinese takeout food. They got no
Well,
pasta left.
I'm sure you'll make a run to the grocery store this afternoon to get some more.
Yeah, fuck that keto diet. I think it's all carbs, baby. That's why I'm going to start an all-carb diet. Believe me, a lot more people will be on my side than the other side.
Hey, there's two things I know nothing about: keto and what's that other thing? Gluten.
Gluten, yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea what gluten-free. I have no idea what that means.
I asked for extra gluten on my food, actually.
Yeah, but you want gluten on that pizza? I don't care.
I think it's a great condiment. Extra gluten. All right.
All right, what we got today, Sweets?
We have shooting today. And here's how we're going to organize it. And you're going to run with this one, and you just ask me when you want me to add stuff in. Let's talk about, obviously, teaching points, the difference between tweaks and changes, because there is a big difference. And, obviously, when coaches are trying to change a player's shot, God forbid, the best times to do it versus the best times to make little tweaks and changes and things like that. And obviously the importance of the skill, because it's so important. So that's how I want to organize it. And then you run with that. Well, you run with this one. So, and like I said, I'll add in whenever. All right. So let's talk about obviously the importance of being able to shoot, and then, some of your favorite teaching points of the whole process of making somebody a better shooter.
Okay. Well, I think that any coach you would talk to would agree that it's probably the most important skill that you have to have in the game.
Right.
Because that's the only way you can score points. Right. So it's probably the most emphasized skill when you watch players work out. I mean, 90% of their workout is going to be working on some sort of shooting, in my opinion. I mean, you never see guys out there working on slides and closeouts and, rebounding position and all that. It's, most guys like to work on their shooting. So it's the most important skill, especially in today's game at any level, with the importance placed on 3-point shooting that we've seen in the last 20 years, and maybe even especially the last 5 years. The shooting's getting better. The distance that players can shoot now is just boggles the mind. We never thought 10 years ago we would see this many 3-point shots in a game with the depth at which they're being taken and made. No
question. I'm at the pro level for sure. Most positions, I think, in high school and even in college, we were just talking about regular players, not necessarily players that are, professional level, but or a high level. But just on average, a high school, college kid, I think, should master the 15 to 17-foot shot. And then if they have the 3-point shot, great. But your shot making, even from that distance, is a very important trait. Like you said, probably arguably the most important trait to have in basketball.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that young kids, 8, 9, 10 years old, when they're first starting out to play basketball, it's those are kind of the formative years, those first 4 or 5 years, because if a kid doesn't learn proper technique, that could stay with him the rest of his career.
Yes.
So I really think it's important that if you're teaching shooting to young kids, it's really important to have the basic fundamentals down that we'll get into later. But sometimes if that's not taught correctly, it's something that'll stay with them the rest of their career. Now, can you change it later on? Sure.
Yep.
But it's really tough to change once they've developed a habit.
Just so you know, Sev, the 23-23 is in effect. Okay.
And this topic today, we could spend 10 hours on.
Yeah, no doubt. Hopefully we won't spend 8 hours on without us even talking about the actual teaching of shooting.
Yeah.
So all right, you have a player that says to you, "Hey, Sev, I want to become a better shooter. I'm not really, my technique, my form's off. I want to sort of build it from the feet up or the ground up. How do I, so what does that look like as far as what are your things that you like to build? And I'll talk about mine in a minute as well, but what's most important if you're building a shot from the ground up? What are your most important teaching points of that?
It's funny, back in I want to say 86, I wrote my master's thesis on shooting. And, we talked about, it was kind of based on what you just talked about, building the shot from the ground up, from the feet up. And I've changed a little bit of my thinking in the last, however many years that is, 35 years. But I still believe that there are some of those fundamentals that I wrote about way back then that I still believe in. I'm a firm believer that when we start teaching shooting and we start looking at a player's shot, that the hand placement on the ball, both hands, be taught first.
Okay.
Because a lot of players don't know, where to put their hands, basically on the ball, the shooting hand, the balance hand, and how those two relate to each other. So I'm a firm believer on, starting off with the hand placement on the ball being correct. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in shooting, to me, there's a couple of, I break it down in a few parts, not many, but being able to shoot the ball straight, which I think has most to do with shooting the ball straight, is your hand positioning on the ball. I try to limit as much movement as possible throughout the whole body. And the jump of the shot, I try to limit, way over jumping. So balance, making sure the ball's straight out of the hand, and limiting movement are probably three of the things that I'd take really serious about it. But I agree with you. I think the hand positioning on the ball and getting the hand under the ball is the best we can. And how that sort of, with the, if you add the elbow of the shooting hand, trying to get that as straight as possible, getting out of the hand. And I think it does start with the shooting hand. And I agree with you. It's a very important part of it.
Yeah. And, to kind of go back to what you said earlier, if I've never worked with a player before and now I've got the player on the court for the first time and I've never seen him shoot, I'm not going to do anything probably for the first 10 minutes except watch him shoot. Just say, go ahead and shoot. I'll toss him the ball, pass him the ball, whatever. Go ahead and shoot some 10-foot, 15-foot shots so you kind of have a baseline of what you're working with. And you can observe that player and, look for 2 or 3 specific things that you want to address right away. I think you and I can both agree that when it comes to teaching shooting, that less is more.
I agree.
I mean, we could break it down into 18 to 20 different things. But I think less is more. If you can really figure out what are the 2 or 3 main things that need to be changed or improved upon, then that's a lot better than trying to change 20 things.
I agree. I mean, throughout my whole career, I've seen so many of these shooting gurus and, these shot doctors. And, I feel as though if you name yourself in the third person, you're full of shit anyway. Anybody 3 things to me, Sev, on the shooting coaching. If you name yourself in the third person, or you mention anything about math or science or a golf swing, you're full of shit. Just leave it alone. But anyway, I do agree with that. I think that I try to talk to as many people about shooting as I can. I learned everything from Dave Hopla, everything. Since I was 12 years old, I've known Dave, and I've seen Dave not only work, but teach and also talk it. And everything that I probably 95% of my stuff comes from Dave. And then I'll tweak the last 5 or 6% on things that I just sort of change. Like you said about your thesis, you sort of changed your ways since then. It's the same thing with me. But with me, when I talk to people about shooting and they say, well, here's the 58 things that I look at every shot. I'm like, come on, dog. What do you fucking work for Enron? You're full of shit. You're a scammer. No, shooting's not that complicated. There's a few things you look at. I think everybody has a different definition of what a perfect shot looks like. But like you said, I think less is more. I think you sort of look at a few things. And everybody's a little different in what they look at and how they look at it. But I agree with you. I think it's sort of 3 or 4 things, 5 tops that you would look at, not 53,
you know, once you know, I don't know if we want to break down exactly what we mean by hand positioning.
Yep.
You know, we probably don't. But once you've established the correct hand positioning, I think then you need to start from the bottom and work your way up. And when I say the bottom, I mean the feet. You know, players have to understand that the shooting foot needs to be forward slightly.
Right.
How far away their feet are spread. I'm not into all that 10 toes to the rim stuff, because when you shoot the ball, you watch most players shoot, 10 toes are not pointed at the rim.
Yeah, it's different. It's different.
You know, but it is important to have the shooting foot forward.
Yeah.
You know that, and to have a nice base when you shoot, and that's when you talk about the balance. And then to me, we just kind of work our way up and talk about their legs and how important it is to get your legs into the shot. And then you talk about the ball positioning. You know, once you catch the ball or come off the dribble, where do you want to actually begin the shot? You know, some people call it the shot pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Then we start talking about that, and then you really get into the mechanics of the shot as far as the release, elbow point, and all that stuff with the hands. But I like to start with the positioning of the hands, and then, like I said, with the bottom, and kind of work your way up and talk about why those things are important.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when people are working on a shot with a player, you got to understand that players' sort of focus is not very long. So when you're explaining what the shot means to you as a coach, I think you need to be able to explain it in a couple of minutes of what it should look like, and then obviously work on it and break down each part. But to me, first of all, there's a million ways to teach shooting, and most of them are right. I had some thoughts on shooting as far as arc and hand placement and footwork, like 10 toes to the rim and things like. So one summer after the season, a few years ago, I broke down 30 of the best shooters in the league, 3-point shooters in the NBA, to try to see what they do technique wise. And I watched them with I think it was 200 makes or whatever. I watched 200 to 250 shots of every player in that 30 list. And I found that a lot of players just shoot differently. Their arc, their feet, their twisting versus not twisting. So, and that's where I've always thought that there's a million ways to teach it. But for me, Sev, if I'm going to talk to a player, Kyle Collinsworth comes to mind, because that was the player I spent the most with their shooting. And we broke his shot down. Kyle was a player that played at BYU and, has played sparingly in the NBA and mostly in the D League. But when I talk about shooting, I'll be like, look, the hand's got to be under the ball, the best you can. Get it off your palm. You want to line up your hand, your elbow, and your foot, just sort of cut your body in half. Try to have everything line up the best it can. Where your elbow's in, it sort of lines up with your foot. You're not really looking at it and judging it, but you're doing it the best you can. Your hands under the ball. And then when you add the non-shoot, the guide hand, whatever you want to call it, Hopler tells me that these two thumbs need to form a T on the ball,
exactly
under the ball and side of the ball. And then
one thing that I with young kids, I will say to start with them, I'll say, okay, let's make a T with our thumbs.
Yep.
A little bit separated.
Of course.
And then just turn sideways.
Yes. Yeah.
A separated T and turn your hand sideways. And to me, that's the easiest way to explain hand positioning, obviously with your hand underneath the ball. But I always like to start with the separated T with your thumbs and then just sideways. And the other thing, when you talk about the elbow being straight, a lot of times, this is an old Herb Lizzie thing. I used to watch him teach shooting so much, and he would talk about the elbow. And as you walk naturally down the street and you're swinging your arm, as you walk naturally, and now your arm just comes up into the shooting position. Wherever that is, that natural bringing up of the arm is where the elbow should be. Now, what if a guy walks down the street with his elbow out like this, and he brings, okay, that's natural.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to get that elbow back in if their arm swings naturally. So what you're saying is correct, and I agree. And players may say, well, what do you mean? Just swing your arm and bring it up naturally to there, and that's the alignment.
No doubt. I try to
like you said, there's a ton of ways to teach that.
Right, and try to line it up. You know,
Mhm.
obviously the non-shoot, the guide hand, you want it to try, obviously not to try to mess with the shot and try to get the hand off the palm. When you follow through and you come up with it, I want 5 fingers to the rim on the follow through to make sure
Right.
they're going straight. And then I want that elbow, and this is a Dave Hopla thing, you know, because I'm a big arc fan. Like I want the ball to get high if I could, or up a little bit, not a line drive, JJ Redick style, you know, and then I want elbow to be as high as my eyebrow in the release to get, you know, good arc. My thing with arc is this, Sev, like, again, breaking down all these shooters, not a lot of them had really high arc. A lot of them had like middle of the road. But my thing is, if you're not a JJ Redick, you're not born to shoot, right? A lot of these players are Ray Allen and JJ Redick and all these guys. You need as much help from gravity as possible. So if your shot's not perfectly on, you need a little help from gravity. And I think you need to have the ball soft on the rim. And I think a higher arc is going to get you some bounces, and the ball is going to be a little like slower and deader on the rim to get you some bounces and get you some help. But on my jump,
Yeah.
you know, like that, like
Yeah. You and I, yeah, and you and I are right on the same page when it comes to elbow above the eyebrow.
yeah,
I mean, that's a really important, teaching point for all players. You know, on that release, if the elbows doesn't get above the eyebrow, you're not going to get the ball up in the air with the arch that you need. I think one of the best things that's come around the last few years, and you know, most high school or colleges aren't able to have one of these at every basket, is the Noah's Arc, and it actually measures and gives you a verbal feedback right away on the arc of that shot. And you know, people talk about what's the best degree that the optimum degree would be like 42 to 45.
Yeah.
You know, and you won't get there unless that elbow gets above the eyebrow.
Yeah.
And you talked about line drive shooters, and I've been able to be around 2 of the best line drive shooters that I've ever seen. And one was JJ that you mentioned. He is a line drive shooter.
Right.
And the other is Kawhi.
Right.
Kawhi is a very flat line drive shooter. And he's mastered kind of the 3-point and the mid-range shot, but he still shoots a very flat shot that just happens to go in.
If you got
for most players, I would look at their shot. That's the optimum, that, you know, because they are very flat.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think if you got perfect technique and like JJ Redick, I've coached against JJ when he was like 16 years old. I mean, obviously he's been a shooter his whole life. And if you're that high level of a shooter, you could have that low arc. It's like floaters, right? I like that floater up and straight. Tony Parker shoots like a line drive, but the guy was so good at it, he has control of the ball, just like a shooter would. So I like to have it getting up a little bit. I don't want a line drive. I want it up a little bit. And like I said, breaking down all those shooters that summer, a lot of them had that sort of middle of the road arc where, you know, like Kyle Korver would have that, you know, and then not many of them had that really high arc, which, you know, I believe in. But, you know, I do believe in the hand positioning, the tees, elbow to your eyebrow in the release. I do like Klay Thompson's like this. He has his 10 toes to the rim, and I don't care about 10 toes to the rim. What I like about it is limiting movement on the shot, meaning like not twisting in the air. Here's the thing. You could twist. I don't mind. Like a lot of players do twist. You can twist, but the problem is if your release point and your release timing isn't perfect where you're not starting to twist. Like if you shoot and then twist, it doesn't affect the shot. But if you are you starting to twist and then you're trying to get the shot off as you twist, that's where it impacts the shot. I do like, you know, Kawhi's a little like that, but mostly Klay Thompson is the best I've seen at it, where he'll go straight up and straight down, where again, it's limiting movement on the shot, which I don't like moving parts in the shot. But like I said, everybody's different. And like I said, 30 of those shooters, not everybody had that. Some twisted, some didn't, some stayed straight, some came together. You know, everybody does it a little bit different, you know?
And I think another thing that you'll find with good shooters is, you know, as their feet come off the floor, there's going to be natural movement to go forward.
Yep.
You know, a long time ago, the old school coaches would say, you know, jump straight up and down.
Yep.
On your shot. Well, that's kind of counter intuitive to what the body's mechanism actually wants to do, which is go forward. And most of your momentum is going to take you forward on a shot. And so if you watch a player's feet, they're actually going to be landing, you know, a few inches in front of where they took off.
Sure.
Yeah, what you just want to avoid is going backwards, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and forward's not bad as long as you're not lunging forward. You know?
Right.
Yeah, straight up and down and a little bit, especially off the dribble, you're going to move. You know, on a spot up, you could probably try to limit as much movement as possible on a spot up. But on a off the dribble jump shot, your body's weight's taking you wherever you're going, right, left, you know. And like you said, you just don't want to go back. I think it is a death sentence to your shot if your head goes back on the shot. So, you know, that is a problem trying to be, you know, if you're going back, you're fighting gravity. It's a tough thing. Yeah. It's almost as bad as shooting on the way down. I think the two death sentences as a shooter is shooting on the way down and having your head go back and take your whole body back. So those are two things that.
Yeah, because when the head comes back, the ball's going to come back.
Yeah.
And now your body's working against itself. And when you're trying to get that forward momentum. Let's talk about another thing that it's kind of in Clay. It's kind of, and I'm okay with that with a player having some dip in his shot. Yeah, Clay's one of the best. He never dips. I mean, it's from here and it's up. But if you watch really good shooters shoot, there are some excellent shooters that actually dip the ball to get their momentum going up. And I don't have a problem with that. I wouldn't try to change that if the guy's having success. You know, if I catch the ball, now my natural motion is to dip it a little bit to get your rhythm up. I'm not a big believer in the shot has to start here.
No.
Without a rhythm. So I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm okay with there being a dip in the shot.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you were saying about like coaching speak and old time coaches. Like we all were taught, don't dip the ball, dipping's bad. And just like anything,
just like we were all used to taught, hey, follow your shot.
Follow your shot. Where you want me to follow it to? Yeah.
Nobody does that anymore. Follow your shot. You follow your shot. It's it's a layup at the other end.
No question. I think, Sev, like just like anything else, you got to watch every player. Like watch the best shooters. That's why I wanted to do that project. Some dip, some don't. Charlie Villanueva and Anthony Morrow could like catch it here and bring it right into their shot from like here. It was crazy. I would never teach a shooter how to do that. But if that's what they do when they're comfortable, great. I think you could dip as long as the dip isn't going way down. And then because now you're slinging it up and now it's bringing you back where like if you dip it, I think anything of like groin level and above, you're good. I think if you're going below your groin, you're in trouble. Like, that could be like if you're dipping it way down and way up. But like who does that? But like I don't care. If the player's comfortable and confident with their shot, I don't really care. Like there are some things that there are some hills you want to die on. That's definitely not one of them. Like if they dip a little bit, that's fine. It's just one of those things. It's one of those things. Maybe when you wrote that thesis, you were all against it. And now since then you thought, no, I'm serious. Like a lot of people say, like, I remember I was working out a player at a prep school once. Like I was like 23 years old and some coach came up to me, like cussed me out about, hey, he's dipping, you shouldn't dip. And, you should just catch it and go up in your shot. And I thought, well, that's not bad. That's not a bad idea. But then you watch all these other players, they dip. It's not a big deal. Just don't dip too far where it's really impacting the shot. Again, if it's not impacting your body movement, you're good. You're fine.
Yeah. And speaking of dippers, the best dipper I ever coached was Brad Miller.
Really?
As soon as practice ended, he'd have a dip in. Didn't take him long.
I forgot about that. Yeah, he's the best. He's probably
by the way one of the greatest all-time guys.
I heard he's in a lot of tomfoolery. That guy.
Let me quick Brad Miller story.
Sure.
When we traded for him, he came in mid-season to the Bulls.
From Sacramento, right?
Pardon me?
From Sacramento or from?
It might have been Sacramento.
Don't worry about it. Go ahead.
But he came into the press conference, into the Berto Center, and now our team's owned by the same guy that owns the White Sox.
Right.
And Brad Miller's a huge Cubs fan.
Yeah.
So he came to his first press conference with the Bulls wearing a Cubs baseball cap, and I said, I like that guy.
They probably voided his team option for the next year already.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
No,
so, dipping, like you said, that's not a hill that I'm willing to die on. Now, release point,
yeah,
and hand positioning, and making sure you have some rhythm with your legs. All those things are things that are, I think most coaches would agree, are points that have to be emphasized.
Yeah. One thing that I did notice, like, I remember we had Tony Allen, not only with the Celtics when I was there as a scout, but also with Grover, and he would shoot, and, he would be like the prototypical guy that would shoot on the way down. And
right.
The biggest problem on his shot, and it's something that I didn't want to change. It was in the summer, but it was like July, August when he came in. But what he would do is bring the ball way back. And again, from analyzing players from the side on that project, one thing I did notice, which was most of the shooters, all 30 of them never brought the ball behind their ear. So like they could shoot it here, they could shoot it here, they could shoot it here, they could shoot it up, but that hand never went behind the ear on the, like when they're trying to gather the ball and like wherever they're going to shoot it from. Obviously, like the best spot is like here up, like you got Marcus Aldridge and Rasheed Wallace who shot up there. But like as long as you're not bringing it back behind the ear, because what happens is when you jump up and you bring that ball behind the ear, that's gonna start you on your decline on your jump, and now you're slinging the ball at the rim, and it's a line drive, shooting on the way down, and you're moving. So those are three negatives. It's sort of like having my waistline, my face, and my hair level. Like it's a recipe of disaster if you're doing all those things.
And no more pasta in the house.
And no more pasta in the house. Come on, that's like no. It's like no pasta and no waffles in my house. I'm fucked. So,
and speaking of the 1-2, an example is when we first got Blake. He had sat out that 1 year, and then we came in the next year, and we first got with him that summer. Just watching him shoot, the biggest obstacle I think we had to overcome was shooting on the way down.
Yeah.
We either refer to it as one motion shot
or
a two motion shot, 1-2. And 1-2 is actually shooting on the way down.
Right.
Because if you come up 1 and then you shoot it 2, you're actually shooting on the way down.
Right.
So that was the biggest obstacle that Blake had to overcome, was shooting a one motion shot as opposed to a two motion shot. And because like you said, if it's a two motion shot, you're shooting the ball on the way down.
Yeah.
And now you've got all kinds of issues.
And when you shoot on the way down, the problem is like, okay, the arc is messed up. You're going to be a line drive shooter for the most part.
Yeah.
Second thing is your release timing, like, is always going to be different. And I think the brain, like, it's, shooting's a motor skill, and it's something that the brain sort of logs. Like, most players, if say an NBA player that they shoot during the season, they'll probably shoot somewhere in the neighborhood of 20,000 shots in the summer and during the season in workouts. So just say like they had the same shot for 6 years before they got to you. They're shooting in the neighborhood of 100,000 times the same way. So when you're changing that shot, it's going to take a while to train the brain to release the ball on the way up versus the way down. So that is a problem. So like, I don't know. I just think you try to minimize movement. You have your feet right. You have good balance, hand under the ball, release, elbow to your eyebrow. And that's basically, and not bringing it behind your elbow. Dave Hoppler, again, was, the one thing that he stresses, and it's huge, is one-hand form shooting.
Yeah.
And because it showcases the whole thing, and you could correct your work. You could see where it is. You don't have the second hand involved with it. And you could see where the release point is, where the follow through is. And I think that's a one-hand form shooting is a weapon that everybody, and a tool that everyone should use in becoming a better shooter. It's again, it's the purest form of a shot because you're not jumping, you don't have the second hand in it. So you could correct everything with your feet, your hand positioning, where your elbow's at, and balance.
Finger spread.
Yeah, finger spread, follow through, and like when I changed Kyle Collinsworth's shot, the program, he would have had to shoot somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20,000 shots with one hand, like throughout the summer before he even added a second hand to it. He didn't play summer league that summer. He started like his season ended in April. He started in like a week after that, and literally we had this program where he would just shoot from 5 spots one hand. He would do a certain amount. Then like he'd do that for like a week. Then the second week was the same 5 spots, but then he did in the corner as well. And then he needed to retrain the brain because he shot it from like here, and that was one of his biggest problems. He would shoot it from like his shoulder instead of getting it up here. So he had to retrain the brain to get it up here. You're not going to do that by just talking to him once. It has to retrain the brain doing it thousands of times until and then he added the second hand again, no jump. And then he jumped. Like, I don't think he jumped and added a second hand till like the 2.5 months into the program. So,
I think, the biggest thing in shooting is to be able to create a positive muscle memory.
Yeah.
And one of the hardest things to do is to erase a negative muscle memory and transform that into something that's positive. And it takes a long time. Going back to Blake as an example, it took probably till his 3rd or 4th year where he got actually comfortable and percentages went up. And we're just talking about mid-range shooting, 15 to 18 feet.
Yeah.
And it's something that takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of repetition. And like we always say, repetition is not punishment. And getting back to the form shooting thing, when I'm working out a player, whatever it is you're working on, say we got a set of whatever, I like to always come back to the form shooting in between sets.
Sure.
Just as kind of a reminder to get them back down to earth, so to speak, and get them back to the form shooting, however you want to have them make 5, 10, whatever.
Sure.
Before we move on to the next thing. And then we do the next thing, and then we'll come back and do form shooting. Bring your heart rate down. Let's get back and relax and get to the form shooting, one hand or two hand. But I think we don't do enough of form shooting. Watch little kids work out and play. Right. They hardly ever do it.
No, they just shoot threes. So they'll come, 8-year-olds come out trying to shoot threes.
So I think form shooting is, and like you said, after a while, you're into the tens of thousands of just form shooting.
Yeah.
And that will help the muscle memory down the line.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And what Dave would do is, what Hops would do is he would have you hold the ball out, stop everything, hold the ball out for like 2 or 3 seconds, then get it into your shot, wherever mechanics the L, and then get into your stance, hold that for like 3 seconds, and then go up to your shot. This way, like, because I've seen a lot of people do form shooting, they'll get the ball, they'll just do this, they just want to mess around with it. With that, like holding it here, up, straight up, and then get into your stance, but like holding it, again, your brain takes that recording of where it wants it, and especially when you're trying to retrain the brain. And shot release, and we'll get into the next part we'll get into right now before we get into it, okay, so break down your perfect shot and give it to me in like 90 seconds to 2 minutes. What's your perfect looking shot in the sense of like the little teaching points that we just broke down?
The perfect shot would be, number one, that they have their feet in the correct position.
Yep.
Shooting foot slightly forward, knees bent as they begin the shot. The second thing would be a perfect hand position on the ball, which we talked about. Hand under the ball, fingers spread, enough space in here so the ball's on the pads of the fingers.
Right.
The balance hand not having anything to do with the shot and being right against the side of the ball as opposed to here or on top of the ball.
Yes.
Balance hand has nothing to do with the shot. So making sure that the balance hand is correct, making sure that the shot is straight up. My elbow is in line with my foot, my shooting foot.
Yep.
making sure that my head stays still and balanced
Right.
and not coming back. Okay,
Right.
it's not bring my ball release point back.
Yep.
Bringing it up to the proper position, and on my release, making sure my elbow's above my eyebrow,
Yep.
and I have my 5 fingers falling through, waving goodbye to the ball.
Yep.
And then making sure that my momentum on the release is going slightly forward.
Right.
And definitely not backwards.
Right.
I mean, 90 seconds, I probably took longer than that, but.
No, but that's that again. I think as a player, if you're talking to a player and you're saying, okay, this is what I want your shot to look like, just by explaining it, where you're not giving them like, the positioning of the sun versus Venus and multiply it by the gross natural product and we'll get your shot. Like they don't want to hear that.
Right. And that's, we talked about at the beginning, 20 different things as opposed to maybe 4 or 5.
Yeah. So with me, same thing. Line up the hand, the ball, hand, elbow, foot, like shot line. Like I said, right foot in front of left if you're righty, left foot in front of right if you're lefty. Tease with the hand. The ball's on your pads, off your palm. Tease with both fingers. Your guide hand's really not into the shot. When you jump, you try to go straight up or a little bit forward. The ball doesn't go behind your ear. It gets off your shoulder. And anything like this level or higher is fine. You're following through, 5 fingers to the rim, like you said, waving goodbye, elbow to your eyebrow, and then follow through. And like I said, just keep the movement out of it, and then you're good to go. And keep your head straight. And I think it's sort of the same. I think we might have a little, like, you don't mind twisting versus I would rather it more straight. But that's, again, I think if you're consistent with what you teach, both of it, I think both shots are fine. And I think we're good. Second, go ahead, Sev.
And when you're working with the player on shooting, there's 4 main areas, maybe 5 main areas I think that you need to be able to understand how to teach. Mm-hmm. You're teaching a stationary catch and shoot, mm-hmm. or a spot shot or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Where there's no movement, there's just shot preparation. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to teach shooting off the dribble.
Yep.
Both ways, and that could be, pull up mid-range, that could be off pick and rolls, that can be in transition off the dribble. Right. But you have to be able to teach shooting off the dribble.
Right.
How do you teach it going right as opposed to going left? Mm-hmm. You have to be able to teach shooting off the move. The player's moving. Maybe it's off a screen. Maybe it's running his lane. Maybe it's making just a cut and a flash. But how do you teach a player to shoot off the move? And then you also have 3-point shooting.
Right.
You teach 3-point shooting any different than you would mid-range shooting.
Right.
And then you have free throws that I think is important too.
Right.
So if you're going to teach shooting, you have to be able to address all those different areas from a footwork standpoint, balance standpoint, all that stuff. So it's not just, form shooting and catching and
not at all. Not at all. And let's get into the next part, which I think is something that not enough teams address. And I've been around enough teams to understand how sort of negative it can be. Look, in my opinion, when you have a staff, okay, this isn't your plays, this isn't your defensive rotations, this isn't, sets, things like that. These aren't drills. When you're teaching shooting, I really feel as though you need one voice on shooting, and no one talks about shooting the players individually except that one voice. Because I think that even if everybody knows the teaching points, that everybody's definition of a perfect looking shot, everyone's got different sort of views on it. And everybody, like, their definition of what a perfect shot looks like, make or miss, is different. Mine's different than yours. And if you're teaching shooting, but then I'm like, you're the shooting coach of the staff, but I'm working with a player, and like he goes, Mike, what do you think my elbow positioning? I'll be like, yeah, it looks great. And then you come around and you said, Mike, what are you doing? That that elbow's way wherever, either 2 in or 2 out. So I do think that I'd like your opinion on, like, if you would allow that multiple people to teach shooting on a staff, what that does. What's your thoughts on staffs with shooting coaches in general?
Players can only have one voice when it comes to the shot.
Yeah.
But we've all seen it where if a player is really struggling, now everybody kind of wants to get in his ear.
Right.
If a player's really doing well,
mm-hmm.
they want to get into his ear.
No question about it. Credit.
For the credit thing. But you can't put all those different voices in a player's head when it comes to shooting. Mm-hmm. You've seen more teams at the NBA level now hire shooting coaches.
Right.
And like I had to hire one when I was with the Clippers, when I was with Vinny. He said, interview some guys and pick the guy that Blake and DJ are most comfortable with. So that's what we did. And his was the only voice when it came to that. And if you're an assistant or a player development coach and you feel like you have to say something or get in their ear, make sure you're on the same page as the shooting coach or whoever it is that's the main guy teaching shooting. Because 4 or 5 different guys in his ear, I mean, that's just stimulus overload.
A lot of times it's not malicious, and most times that I've dealt with it, it's not malicious, but it's like everyone's got a different view. And like I said, we could have 5 coaches out there watching one person shoot, and we'll have 5 different takeaways about the shot. And I just think everyone sees it differently. You could write down, memorize like the 10 commandments of everything that a shooter needs to be able to do, and still it'll be different versus like what I think a great shot looks like versus what you think one is. And that's where I think that players get confused when you have all these voices talking to them as far as like shooting coach is concerned.
And you and I, and one of my favorite things to do is to watch shooting coaches or read what they write, watch them teach, because I like to see, what other guys are doing. And like you mentioned, Dave Hopla, he's one of the best. John Townsend, who's been with several NBA teams, is one of the best. His way of teaching and points of emphasis are different than Dave Hopla's.
Sure.
But they're still good.
Yeah.
So there's no right way, wrong way. We had a shooting coach when I was with the Clippers who never, ever addressed legs, feet, shooting off the move, shooting off the dribble. His whole emphasis was just the shot, the catch and shoot, and what happens in the upper body, which was fine. But that was his way of teaching it.
Right.
So there's a lot of different ways to do it. But like you said, it's got to be one voice. It can't be 5 voices. Now, unless the head coach gets involved, and then what are you going to do? That's the head coach.
We've been there. But I just think that if I'm a head coach and I have my staff in the beginning of the year, and I'm like, hey, if John's our guy that's teaching shooting, you got to have the whole staff, and you have to practice restraint. Say, look, I know everyone wants to help. To me, I don't care about being on the same page with the shooting coach. It's still not going to be the same page. The shooting coach knows not only the teaching, not only like what a great shot looks like, but like I always thought a shooting coach, more than a player development coach, should be like, you watch NASCAR and you got the guy in the pit talking to the driver. Like they need to be the only voice they hear in those headphones. What was that movie with Tom Cruise? That was great. Tropic Thunder. Thunder Road. I think Thunder Road. Who knows? I'm not IMDb, but anyways. But I think that. But that like same thing. Like you got to have somebody in your ear that it just sort of makes sense. And I think like you need to, as a head coach, you got to talk to your staff. Your players you'll never control. Players are always going to chime in, but your coaches, got to be practice restraint on not talking about the shot. Let that person, whoever that person is, like let them, because I think that minimizing the voices, especially with shooting with a player, is so important because it's such a sensitive thing that all players.
Oh, it's very sensitive.
Yeah.
And let's talk about it, real quick. If you're a high school coach, you may be the only coach. Maybe you have an assistant.
Right.
So now you're in a totally different situation if you're a high school coach, because, let's be honest, high school coaches probably don't spend a lot of time working on shooting individually with their players.
Right. Yeah.
I found that as a high school coach. So, that makes it really, really tough. You're worried about a million things. If you're at a high school coach and you got one assistant, you got all these things you're going to worry about and have got to address. And, individual shooting might not be at the top of your list.
No question. When I was a JV coach 20 plus years ago, what we would do before every practice, again, Dave Hopla special, we would do the one-hand form shooting into the one hand and the second. What we would do is just explain and say, look, this is what we're looking for in the shot. It's not going to be perfect. We can't correct you because we don't have the staff to do that. But make sure that, hand is under the ball the best you can, elbow to your eyebrow, follow through. And at least if you worked on it 6 or 7 minutes a day where they're doing that and they're addressing those little things, even on just form shooting, if that's the best you got, at least you're addressing the players getting reps and they're self-correcting,
And I think as a high school coach, you have to have your practice plan enough time for shooting.
Yeah.
And however that looks is up to you.
Sure.
But you have to put time into your practice plan for shooting. The other thing, Sweet Chuck, I think at the optimal end game for a player is to get where the player gets to the point where he is his own best shooting coach.
Yeah.
He understands and gets to know his shot and the way his shot should feel so well that when he starts missing, he understands why.
No question about it.
He's able to make the adjustment. A lot of players never get there. Some do, and they'll understand why they're in a slump.
Yeah.
And be able to make that correction.
Yeah, I agree. As a teacher, I think, Sev, whatever we're teaching, we want to get our players to the point where they could self-correct. They're hearing us enough, and we're explaining ourselves good enough.
Yeah.
Where they understand they could self-correct, and they know it right after the rep. They don't wait and make it. And that's another thing.
Exactly.
And that's another thing that we'll talk about a little later, but not worried about result when you're teaching shooting. The best.
Yeah, you can't worry about makes and misses.
No, worry about how they shoot the ball. That's why I'll, especially with floaters, because that's my specialty. But right when it gets out of the hand and I see the trajectory on that, I'll be like, good shot, bad shot, perfect. And I've seen some perfects where they airball or throw it over the backboard. I don't care. Same thing with a shot. When it leaves the hand, you should say good or bad. You should be able to know, regardless if it goes in or not. Because if you're teaching result and you're treating your player based on result, they're gonna see that pretty quick. They're gonna pretty quick.
And another thought that just came into my head as you were speaking, when you're working with a player on shooting, I think it's really important that you be able to have some restraint and you don't have to make a comment on every shot.
Sure, no question.
A lot of coaches and players are going to get sick of it.
Yeah.
You don't have to make a comment, good or bad, on every shot that the player takes.
Right.
You need to back up and take more of a big picture view on how they're doing, as opposed to chirping at them on every shot, because they're going to come back at you at our level anyway. I mean, high school kids may not.
Yeah. I think
just be cognizant of that when you're working with the player on their shooting.
Right. I mean, there are sessions where maybe that would be important, but not many. Like you said, you can't be something that you do that every day. They'll get sick of it. Let's talk about the differences between small tweaks and major changes to the shot, and what that definition looks like to you as a teacher. And let's get into that a little bit, like tweaks versus changes.
Yeah, major changes is something that cannot happen, in my opinion, during the season.
Yeah.
Major changes, starts right when the season's over, and you have to sit down with the player and give evidence as to why these major changes need to take place. It could be video evidence, it could be statistical evidence, probably a combination of both.
Right.
And and why this major change has to take place. And then you have to set up a plan for that player. And then you have to, get into executing the plan. But tweaks, I think you can tweak with the shot during the season in small doses.
Mm-hmm.
But major changes, I'm a firm believer that if you start making major changes during the season, the frustration level is probably going to go up when you start making major changes before they see the results. So, and I don't think you want to get into all that frustration during the season. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that you need to be sort of like a surgeon. Like if somebody comes in and they got to scrape off some stuff off the bone, and, like it depends on what you're trying to do. Some are like I said, like some are just like a small little procedure and you're good. Some's going to be a microfracture surgery. It's going to take a long time to get better. So I think that, like, to me, I put them in categories. So things like tweaks are going to be follow through. Your footwork, if you're changing your footwork from a jump stop to a 1-2, arc, follow through. You're following through like side instead of like those are some change. Those are some things that small changes.
Minor surgery, sweet job.
Yeah, minor surgery.
Oh.
Yeah, little nose job.
Yeah. That might be major for some people.
Yeah, that's a good point. But me, it doesn't matter. It's lipstick on a pig. But anyways, like in whatever you're going to do, there's going to be a negative vibe to it. There's going to be a negative result to it when you make, because they're going to go up and down. And so like those tweaks will probably take 3 to 6 weeks to sort of during a season to get better. Now, to me, major microfracture surgeries deals with major changes is shot position, shot timing, shot release point, and if your head's going back, which is going to be a major overhaul.
And by shot timing, you would include the 1-2 or shooting on the way down?
The 1-2 shot, not the 1-2 footwork, but yeah, the 1-2.
No, the 1-2 shot on the way down.
On the way down. If you're going to change the jump on your shot, if you think you're jumping too high or not high enough, that's a timing thing. That's going to take, to me, that stuff takes 3 months to 18 months to fix, depending on the player and depending
or release position. If a player has a major flaw in his release position, like Lonzo Ball did, to get it from here, or he was shooting actually on this side, to get it from here over to here, that's another major.
That's shot line. Yeah, that's your shot line.
Yeah.
Like if you're changing your shot line, that's a major change. That's going to be 3 months to 18 months. Now, not many are going to be 18 months, but it's like he said, it's a sensitive thing. And with changing the shot, and this is why I think head coaches should stay away from shooting, because they're ATO masters usually, right? And if like box 2, the screen isn't done on the right angle, and then at halftime they fix the screening angle of box 2, they could probably score on box 2 7 straight times. And they think by little changes that you make is going to make huge things. When you're drawing up plays, yes, I totally agree. But when you're doing something with muscle memory and you try to like change somebody's shot during the season, what happens is anytime you add pressure to a player, they're going to revert back to what's comfortable. And when you're trying to change your shot, I don't care if you spend 8 hours with them, right? If you're 6 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon on their shot straight, and then you play at 6 o'clock, when they get into a game and they got a crowd and they got pressure to make shots, they're going to go right back to what's comfortable to them. I don't care how long you've been spending. When you got games at night and you're working on this fundamental changes, players are going to get all messed up. It's going to take a while. That's why, like, if you don't play in the off season and you've got the time, couple of months to really put into breaking your shot down, you're good. But changing your shot during the season just doesn't make any sense unless a guy's hurt or ineligible for the whole year. That's what my
or he's the 14th man on your roster who's not going to play, like rookies. A lot of times.
If they're not going to play at all,
that's
fine. But like what happens even with that is they shoot before practice, they shoot in scrimmages in practice, they shoot in pregame, they shoot at halftime, and they're always going to revert back. and it's like it's sensory overload. And I think that they need to be locked into their only way to shoot. And I think during the season, you can't lock in anything. With Kyle, when we talked about it, I said, Kyle, he wasn't playing summer league, so he was literally not going to shoot. He's not going to play at a competitive game he didn't do it from April to like September, October. So we had time, and we had the program all set up, and it made a great change. It made him, he got great sort of steam to be able to do that. But look, most high school players are going to play AU. Most college guys are going to work out with their trainer. Like that, it takes major commitment to truly.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And like you said, major changes during the season is going to lead to frustration.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing, going back to the off season shooting, when it comes to that, guys will always ask me, Coach, how many shots should I be making, a day or a week or whatever? And I don't have an answer for that.
No,
I don't know. How what kind of work are you doing? What's your condition level like?
Yeah.
How much work can you handle? And the most important, they also ask, who's important when it comes to shooting? Well, the most important person is the player.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're not committed to it, then change is not going to take place.
Yeah.
And then they got to understand how to work smart on their shot.
Yeah.
Saying I made 500 shots today. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah. It's like the recommended serving size. Who the fuck pays attention to that?
Right.
Yeah.
So, all those things are, have to be figured out, but just be smart about your approach and have a good plan. I don't know. We could talk about shooting forever, I guess.
No, I think that's the major things. Look, we covered the favorite teaching points in shooting. We covered staff and sort of the importance of having one voice. We covered minor changes versus major changes. And then overall, how important, shooting the ball is. But like, it takes commitment to be able to do that. And, there isn't a magic number of shots that you can make. The one thing the one thing I will definitely tell you to stay away from is these shooting toys and devices, like the gloves and the springs and the things that, like, the problem with props, especially when it comes to like positioning the body on a movement, eventually you're gonna have to take those things off, and you're used to having them on, and they hold you in place, like that block thing, like that. I don't know what terrorist device that is. It looks like a dirty bomb to me, but like you're gonna have to shoot a real ball. You're gonna have to train your brain by yourself to be able to like not have all these restraints on you, to be able to bring it to here. And that's only going to come from muscle memory and learning it yourself, not having something that like ties you into a mold,
Right.
Is that the guy that made the shooting block calling you to sue you?
I'm sorry. I thought I had my phone turned off, but I didn't, I guess.
No, it's one of our three viewers are probably pissed about what we're talking about.
Could be.
Well, I think anything else you want to add? We could close it up, but what else do you want to add on that?
Well, if you're a coach, especially a young coach, and you don't have really strong views on shooting, get them, develop them. Like you and I feel really strongly about certain things, and I don't know what those things are for you, but if you don't know, go study some guys, some shooting coaches. We mentioned a few here. But you have to, at some point in your coaching career, you have to develop some really strong opinions and thoughts on teaching shooting.
Yeah.
And I don't know what those are, but I think you need to have them.
Yeah, and I don't think it's our job to tell them what they are. I think everyone's got to sort of figure this out themselves.
Yeah, it was funny. The other day, a coach asked the question, what's the most important trait that a shooter can have?
Okay.
My answer was amnesia.
Yeah. Amnesia.
I mean, if you're going to develop yourself and become a good shooter, you better have a short memory or no memory.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
all
that was one of the great things I learned from working with Coach Tarkanian. He didn't care if the guy missed 10 jump shots in a row, if he was a shooter.
mm-hmm.
He wasn't interested in all that. You know, you'll make the next one. It's okay. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, he was one that really gave shooters confidence to keep shooting.
Yeah, I think even keel as a shooter, even keel, and being positive about the next one's going in, but having an even keel. Don't get too high or too low. And I think that applies to a lot of things. I think one of the worst things you can do as a coach is based off one night or a week trying to change a player's shot. I've seen it where a coach tried to change a player's shot literally 5 times in a year based on streaks and slumps. And the psyche of a player, it's a very sensitive thing with their shot. And, you know, if you're going to like really make them change it, it's a total commitment for them. And then after making this change and they're struggling with it, and like 2 weeks later saying, oh, no, just shoot it another way. Here's how you should shoot it. Oh, no, go back to the old way. And the player, you got to understand the feeling of player says, wait a minute, you made me change this. I believed in you to change it. And now based on 2 weeks of these changes, you want me to do something else? And that's when a player is going to struggle with the new way, but can't remember the old way they shot where they were comfortable and confident with it. And now they're all messed up, and it could have major implications. I think if you're going to change a player's shot, you gotta sneak with, you gotta stay with or with her. Like you got to stay with the player through thick and thin and be their psychologist, because it's going to be a bumpy road, and you can't like continuously like a slot machine just keep pulling the crank and trying to get a different result. You have to, again, have those 3 or 4 or 5 things that you teach in shooting, be consistent with those things and ride with it for a while. Now, look, if it's a year and a half and a year, they're not, 12 months or so, and then it's not really getting great results or even close, maybe you might want to visit making a couple of tweaks, but you can't like every week have a different. It's like those coaches who like run flex for a week and then run motion, then run dribble drive, and then like they keep
right.
like players are going to be like, come on, man, like what are you doing? So I think you have to really understand how sensitive of a topic shooting is to a player. We good, Sev?
I think we covered it all.
There you go. There's H&R Block, Colin. You got your taxi?
I'll run it by the boss and see if she paid it or not.
There you go. Well, we wasted another hour of our 5 viewers' time, Sev.
Well, I hope they got something out of it.
Yeah, hopefully we can get 7 by next week. All right, brother.
All right, sweet.
Eh.
Eh.
Eh.